Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'll be running through my team selection ahead of Game Week 18. Welcome back everyone to another video. Now, first off, I just want to wish anyone celebrating a very Merry Christmas. I'm uploading this on Christmas Eve. Of course, I'm going to also probably be quite busy on Christmas Day itself, so this video is a little bit earlier than usual. We don't have all of the information, although we did get lucky with quite a few press conferences yesterday, and of course, we've had the Arsenal Crystal Palace game as well. So I've at least got most of the information, I think. So hopefully nothing changes on Christmas Day or early Boxing Day, and hopefully you understand me releasing this just a little bit early. And of course, you're probably not going to want to watch this on Christmas Day if you do celebrate anyway. So I thought it'd be helpful to get this one out early. If you did enjoy today's video, I'd massively appreciate it if you could leave a like, hit subscribe, especially because it's Christmas. That would be a fantastic present for me to receive. So thank you very much if you do feel like doing so. And of course, only do it if you enjoyed the episode today. Let's start off by taking a quick look at my team as it's currently set up ahead of Game Week 18. Now, unlike quite a few managers, I haven't actually used my transfers yet. I've got 4 in the bank ready to use, and I know a lot of people moved early, and I was very tempted to do the exact same thing. And honestly, I will probably lose out a little bit because I didn't, because I have tried to wait for as much information as possible, but Bruno Fernandes in particular, I think it is very unlikely he's going to be fit or available anytime soon. It looks likely he's going to be out for a month, and I've waited so long that I might as well wait for the Amorim press conference later today, just to get confirmation. But I could have moved that one on early. I've got a pretty solid idea of who I want to replace him with, and I've lost value on that move. So if you've moved early, and hopefully it's worked out, hopefully you moved after the Bruno Fernandes injury, you probably have a slightly better team value from that decision. Let's take a look at my full 11 so far, but obviously starting off in goal as always. I do have a bit of a decision on my hands. Kelleher at home to Bournemouth or Dubravka at home to Everton. Now, I think out of the two, Brentford are the far superior defence. So if all things were equal, it would be an easy decision to just start Kelleher ahead of Dubravka. And until today, I was kind of just putting that decision to one side. I hadn't really thought about it. I just auto-started Kelleher. But I do wonder if, given Everton's lack of attacking options at the moment, obviously they're without Ndai off at the African Cup of Nations, Dewsbury Hall's out as well, I do wonder if maybe there's an argument to start Dubravka instead at home to Everton. Now, obviously, Bournemouth going up against Brentford are a pretty decent attack. I've got Semenyo starting in my 11 as well. So it would take out that conflict and it would maximise the upside if Burnley, of course, are able to keep Everton at bay. I think I'm still going to start Kelleher because at the end of the day, Burnley are really struggling defensively right now. So I think I'm just going to back Kelleher. He did really well for me last week, of course, saved the penalty. It's a home fixture for Brentford. I don't think they'll keep a clean sheet, but he might get a few save points. And I still think Burnley keeping a clean sheet is relatively unlikely. So I'm probably going to stick with Kelleher. Moving into my back line, I currently am going with a back 4 of O'Reilly, Timber, Anderson, and Lacroix. Lacroix had a very bad day at the office against Arsenal last night, but I don't think that should matter when we take that into account for our FPL decisions. I mean, anyone can have a bad day at the office. He scored an own goal, a little bit unlucky to do so, and missed his penalty. Neither of those two things are going to impact him moving forwards, unless it psychologically plays on his mind going into Spurs. But I don't think that's a problem. So Spurs at home, they're really struggling from an attacking point of view. And 2 of their best progressive passers, Xavi Simons and Romero, are both out of the game. So I think they're going to struggle to break down Crystal Palace. So I actually really fancy Lacroix for this one. I like him as a starter. And if you've got a Palace starting defender, I would be playing them this week. Looks likely that Richards is going to be out, unfortunately, after picking up more than a knock. It looked pretty bad at the time, but he got an injury against Arsenal last night. Glasner's hopeful that he'll be back for Fulham. It looks unlikely for Spurs, but who knows? Obviously, he's going to try and play him if at all possible. Timber and O'Reilly are absolutely fine. A quick word on Timber, though. He played 90 minutes and was on the pitch for the penalties at the end. So played the entire game against Crystal Palace, which I wasn't expecting. I was kind of hoping he'd get reduced minutes, and it will play on my mind a little bit. However, there are a lack of options at right back to replace him right now. So I think that his minutes should be fairly secure for this Christmas period. If he gets one rest, I can probably survive it. I've got enough bench cover over this period, and I don't think it will happen this week either, by the way. But I've got enough cover to hopefully make that okay. And we're not too far away from Gabriel coming back in either. So if we get to the point where Timber looks like a doubt, then maybe I can just swap him for Gabriel. It's possible. Obviously, I'd prefer to have both of them. But Timber for now, I think is absolutely fine with a decent home fixture against Brighton. O'Reilly away from home at Nottingham Forest. The clean sheet odds aren't amazing, but again, it's just an auto include right now. He's got good attacking data. I think an attacking return is probably on the horizon sometime soon, and City have been pretty tight at the back as well, so he's an auto start. Anderson away at West Ham. I don't think it's the best player to be starting this week because Fulham away from home defensively haven't been brilliant and they are missing players. Calvin Bassey, for one, is going to affect them defensively. But they did manage to keep out Nottingham Forest the other day. Anderson is a DEFCON monster and West Ham aren't the most potent attacking team either. So I think he's probably okay to start. I'm not going to overthink this one. And given that I've got transfers to use elsewhere, I don't think he's a priority sell for me either. If I had nothing else to do, I would probably move him on to Michael Keane this week if I had the chance to. And I suppose technically I do have the spare transfers left to do it, but I think there will be more important ways of using those transfers over the next few weeks, given that we are likely to get more injuries, we are likely to get rotation because there are 4 game weeks in 14 days. So wherever I can save a transfer, I'm trying to do so. Moving into my midfield, Saka currently has the vice captaincy. He got reduced minutes against Crystal Palace, which was expected, but I'm glad to see it. He'll be absolutely locked in to start against Brighton. And although a lot of managers are selling him, and it is one option I'll talk about later, I would be reluctant to do so. The attacking data is still very good. I have a gut feeling he'll probably take the next penalty now that Gyökeres has scored one. I think it was kind of gifted to him. Obviously, other people might think Gyökeres is just on them now. I think it's pretty clear that they're going to share penalties personally. So I think Saka will take the next one. And he rarely ever gives away a penalty at home. The penalties that he does give away tend to be in the away games. And I'm not sure whether that's a thing, but I think at the Emirates, it's pretty unlikely that he gives one away to Gyökeres next time. So if he gets a penalty, or Arsenal get a penalty, I think he will probably take it at home to Brighton. Fernandes will obviously be talking about. We've talked about him a lot this week already. He's out. It looks very likely he's going to be out for about a month. And given the amount of games in that month, he is a sell for me. We'll come on to the replacements in a moment. Semenyo ideally would have been a sell this week for Szoboszlai, but Szoboszlai suspended and I've got other problems. So Semenyo away at Brentford is staying for another week. That's absolutely fine. I'm not too bothered by that. Although, of course, there is a conflict of interest with Kelleher in goal there. But hopefully Kelleher can get a few saves. Semenyo can bag a brace and it can all level out and Kelleher can somehow sneak an assist off of a goal kick or something. Who knows? I'm obviously wishful thinking there. But Semenyo stays for another week and then I probably will sell him for Szoboszlai next week or another cheap midfielder if someone else puts their hand up. Foden stays, much like Erling Haaland. The minutes should be fairly secure during this period. He might get brought off early a couple of times, but the data's good. He's got some decent fixtures. He's going nowhere. Same goes for Erling Haaland, who will have the armband this week. Although, if I do bring in a Liverpool attacker, there is an argument to maybe look at them. We'll come on to my captaincy matrix in just a moment. And of course, finally, up front, I've got Thiago. Now, Thiago is a sell in a few different combinations. We'll come on to in a moment's time. But I don't think he's a must sell by any means. In fact, I'm a little bit worried about selling him. I think against Bournemouth, that's exactly the kind of fixture that I can see him doing well in. He has tended to struggle against back threes where he's got 3 centre-backs that he needs to kind of get round or occupy. And I think against 2 centre-backs, he doesn't tend to struggle quite so much. He also is the penalty taker and he's likely to get 90 minutes. So I don't think a penalty taker getting 90 minutes with decent underlying attacking data is ever a bad player to be holding on to. So selling him could punish me. But Nevertheless, he is a sell in a few of my different transfer combinations, and I can completely understand why a lot of managers have sold him, because he hasn't put up a shot in the last 2 game weeks, and there is another certain striker that is putting his hand up who looks very tempting this week especially. Onto my bench, Dubravka we've already talked about. I've got Elliot Anderson and I've got Rodon. Even though the fixture's not great for Elliot Anderson, Man City at home, he'll probably get DEFCON. And who knows? He might bag an attack and return in a lucky game week at some point. Put it this way, I'm pretty happy with him as first sub. Rodon could arguably be ahead of him. I think that's a bit of a coin flip, but Rodon himself isn't a bad player to be relying on. So if crisis strikes and randomly players get rotated, I've got enough bench depth there. And over this Christmas period, having both of them will probably be okay as bench options for the foreseeable. Okay, so quick word on my captaincy matrix ahead of game week 18. It's doing pretty well so far, 12 out of 17 hit rate this season, about 70%. And my returns have been over 1 a game week. So 21 returns in 17, largely thanks to Erling Haaland, it must be said, but averaging 8 points a week. This week, no change. Unfortunately, I'm still going to go with Erling Haaland and keep it boring after a really nice haul in game week 17. It's a more difficult fixture away at Nottingham Forest. They will make it difficult for him. But at this point in time, I need to really find a very good excuse not to go with him. The form he's in, the form City are in, and the fact that Nottingham Forest aren't the best team in the league. Literally, if it was Arsenal, then it might put me off. But Forest are a mid-table club with a mid-table defence at best. So for me, it's going to be Erling Haaland. If you did want to look elsewhere, Ekitike would be my second favourite option. Obviously, the fixture's fantastic. I don't think he'll be on penalties, but I suppose it's possible. And if you do think he's on penalties, then maybe that would be enough to tempt you to move away from Erling Haaland, but I don't think he will be personally, so I will be going with Erling Haaland. You could potentially look at Saka after he got a bit of a rest in the midweek, but if you're using that argument, both Ekitike and Haaland didn't even play in the midweek, so they're even more rested than he is. So I think out of the three, it's Erling Haaland for me. But if you wanted to look differential, go for a Liverpool attacker. I prefer Ekitike over Florian Wirtz for anyone considering Wirtz. Okay, so moving on to a few different transfer combinations that I am considering going into game week 18. And apologies that I'm not definitive, and maybe this section is a little bit more rambly than usual because we are still a couple of days out from the deadline, but I am narrowing down to my favorite few options, so I just wanted to run through them very quickly. Now, number one is probably too passive. I talked about it in my transfer plans video yesterday. Fernandez to Cunha, and then actually when you look at my 11 with just that move locked in, I would be starting Thiago at home to Bournemouth. I've already mentioned that I think that's probably okay, but it would give me a pretty solid starting 11, a couple of good bench options, and I would have 4 free transfers next week to use in a more aggressive way. And it probably provides me a bit of a safety net going into game week 19, then 20, then 21, because most people won't have 4 free transfers at that point, and injuries will probably continue to pile up because we're just hitting that period with 4 games in 14 days for most players. I think we're going to get to a period where many managers, including myself, quite possibly will need to take hits if there are injuries that we're not maybe pre-prepared for with good bench depth. So I would like to roll to 4 free transfers going into next week and maybe just use the one this week. But it does seem too passive to me. So Fernandez to Cunha by itself, I am going to probably make this move, but I'll probably also add on other moves, especially because I've already got 1.4 million in the bank anyway. And this gives me another little bit of money, enough money, in fact, to make some quite aggressive moves in my forward line. So that brings me on to option number 2, which I think is probably my favorite right now, but there are others in contention. That would be to do the Fernandez to Cunha move, but then to also upgrade Thiago to Ekitike with the spare money. Now, I mentioned Thiago I don't think is a must-sell by any means, and I am worried that if I make this move, I'm going to come to regret it because Thiago is going to just keep ticking along pretty nicely with some nice fixtures to come. And again, he's a 90-minute man on penalties and talismanic for Brentford. But Dango Altara has won 4 out of the 5 Brentford penalties himself this year. He's off at the African Cup of Nations, so how many penalties are they going to get? I don't know, maybe slightly less than normal. And let's face it, he has not even taken a shot in the past 2 game weeks. And both of those fixtures were pretty nice for Brentford. So if we're looking at the form, Ekitike is a man in form, 5 goals in the last 3 game weeks, and he's got great fixtures to come, and his ownership is rising very, very quickly. And I just don't know if I've got enough belief in Thiago to outright take on Ekitike, who will be high owned, who is explosive, and who has better fixtures than the Brentford striker does. So I think I'm quite likely to make this move. Thiago up to Ekitike with the spare money. I think it gives me 0.3 in the bank. And of course, I'd still have 3 free transfers next week and onwards. So still fairly flexible. I do quite like it. Option number 3 is to hold on to Thiago and find another route to Ekitike. Now, this would mean that I'd need to really downgrade the Bruno Fernandes position to maybe not necessarily Enzo Lefebvre, but he would probably be my preferred candidate. He is tending to get good minutes. He's got penalties as well. And this week, at least, Sunderland are playing Leeds. It's not a bad fixture. So I don't love it. It's a big, big downgrade. And it would give me both Elliot Anderson and Enzo Lefebvre in my midfield. So that is quite a weak midfield all of a sudden. 2 options that I wouldn't love starting week in, week out. But it does upgrade Mark Giu, who's a dead striker at the moment in my team. He's not playing at all, to Ekitike. So I could switch to 3 up top, Thiago alongside Ekitike, and obviously it would reduce the amount of firepower in my midfield at the same time. So it's another option I'm considering. And then next week, I would probably have to make a couple of transfers to get to Cunha next week instead for Semenyo, most likely. And then I wouldn't have that much money to upgrade either Lefebvre or Anderson. So my midfield would still look fairly weak. So that's why option number 3 is probably not winning for me right now. Then there's option number 4, which is a bit more aggressive. It's 3 free transfers. I've spoken about it once already this week. It would be Fernandes out to Cunha, so no different to options number 1 and 2 there. But instead of selling Thiago, I'd hold on to him, switch to a 3-4-3. Ekitike comes in for Mark Giu, and to fund that, I would make an extra free transfer to sell Bukayo Saka to Declan Rice. This is a downgrade. I don't love it, but it does give me much more depth over this busy Christmas period. And although I'm using 3 free transfers, I think it's less likely that I'm going to be in a crisis in the next few game weeks because I've got 1 extra playing player in my 15. Obviously, Mark Giu doesn't play. But in doing this move, I've got an extra striker, so I've got 3 up front. I've still got 5 playing midfielders. Elliot Anderson would become a true 8th attacker for me, so he's just bench cover most weeks. And then in my backline, I've still got 5 starters. I've got Rodon and I've got Anderson as defenders number 3, 4 and 5 most weeks. So this would give me a lot of depth. I also think Rice's minutes are a little bit more secure than Saka's over this Christmas period. We've already seen Saka get a rest when they were playing in the midweek Premier League fixture against Brentford a few weeks back. So his minutes might not be perfect during this period. And I think if he had started the midweek game against Crystal Palace, I would be more tempted to make this move. But given he only got 25-30 minutes at the end, I think selling him ahead of Brighton at home, which is a decent fixture, it just feels a little bit wrong to me. And I just don't know if I can get massively on board with it. And it also is an extra free transfer used. And that little bit less flexibility later on down the line might be quite painful. It gives me much more depth. I quite like Declan Rice as an option. He'll tick along nicely, very good on the bonus points. If he gets any attacking return, he's likely getting bonus points as well. And he's good on the DEFCON 2. So I suppose my 2 favourite options right now are either options 2 or 4. I think option 4 is a little bit on the aggressive side for me. And because I don't need to sell Saka to get a route to Ekitike, I'm more likely to go with option number 2. But like I said, we've got a couple of days before the deadline. So do make sure you follow me on the social channels above on the ticker. It will be scrolling across now because I'll be posting my team on Boxing Day before the deadline. And I don't want to only give half information with half-baked transfer plans going into the deadline if you care about what I'm doing going into the deadline. So option number 2 is leading for me right now, but option number 4 is in my thinking, and I will probably have to make a decision on this fairly soon because I don't want to mess around with too many more price changes before we get to Boxing Day. I'll quickly mention option number 5. I'm not going to do it, but I do have enough bench cover to actually roll the transfer this week and go to 5 free transfers next week. If option number 1 is too passive, this is way too passive. It would be Rodon or Anderson, Elliot Anderson starting this week. I don't hate either of them, but I massively prefer just buying Cunha this week. Even though it's Newcastle at home, he's got much more upside than either Anderson or Rodon. So I will be making a move this week. So I'm not rolling, but it would be quite funny to roll to 5 free transfers when everyone else is probably down to 1 or 2 going into game week 19. Okay, so finally, let's take a look at my team with those 2 transfers loaded in. Obviously, not completely confirmed yet, but I think the way I'm going to play it is Bruno Fernandes to Cunha, and then I'll probably take Thiago up to Ekatike. Again, I keep mentioning it. I do worry that selling Thiago is a mistake. But I think Ekatike's firepower is just that much better that it's probably worth going for. And of course, there is a risk element. If everyone's buying Ekatike, and I also think he's a great option with loads of firepower, if he scores and I don't have him, I'm going to really regret not making this move, given that I've got the opportunity to do so with just 2 free transfers. And 1 free transfer, I'm going to have to use anyway. So it's for 1 transfer to get a player I really want during this period. He's locked in for very good minutes with Isak out for quite a while now. I just think it's too much of an opportunity to miss. So I think I will be making these 2 moves. Ekatike in against Wolves. Arguably, he should be maybe my vice captain. I could probably switch that from Saka to him, but Haaland will keep the armband. And I think I'm pretty well set up. I'll have 3 free transfers next week still, and of course 0.3 in the bank as wiggle room. And next week, my plan is to maybe downgrade Semenyo anyway. So I'll have a bit more money going into game week 20 and hopefully still 3 free transfers going into that game week, which again will be a very quick turnaround. So we might get injuries. It will be nice to have a few free transfers and a little bit of money in the bank as insurance going into game week 19 and then game week 20 as well. So there you have it. There's my team going into game week 18. Do follow me on the social channels for final confirmation of the team. And obviously things can still change, but wanted to record this early so you can watch it before the Christmas period. And of course, if you are celebrating, I hope you have a fantastic couple of days. I will see you after Christmas as we start preparing for game week 19. If you have enjoyed today's video, I'd massively appreciate it if you could leave a like, hit subscribe to the channel. And like I said, I'll see you next week as we start preparing for game week 19 together.